We all have this lofty goal, the lofty goal of being financially independent, of not having to work, of having enough passive income that covers all of our expenses. It's a big, big goal, and it's a bigger goal than most people might realize. There's very different levels to wealth, right? If you've got nothing, then you're stressed out about the next electricity bill or the next mobile phone bill. If you've got a bit of an emergency fund, right, let's say 3 to 6 months, then you're already not that much stressed out about the bills. You might also be less stressed out about, say, losing your job, right? Because you've got enough capital on the side to find a new job. So there's different levels. There's nothing, or there's having an emergency fund. There's also the level of beating the system, as in things tend to get more and more expensive over time, right? There's inflation. So your salary tends to go down in value over time. But then there's all the evil people, right? The people that have all that capital that profit from all of those capital gains. If you've got a lot of money, then more money comes to you, right? Because you compound your wealth. If you don't have any money, if you're simply just selling your labor, then the system works against you because inflation tends to eat up your purchasing power faster than you can increase your salary, at least if you don't progress in your career. If you're simply just stagnant at your career, over time, you will get squeezed more and more because monetary expansion is roughly 7% per annum, but salaries only grow by 4 to 5% per annum. So over time, you're losing purchasing power if you stand still in your career. And so there's monetary winners and losers in the system. The winners are the people with capital. The losers are the ones without. And there's the split in the middle, distinguishing the losers from the winners. And that is at around, if you set it up correctly, at around 1 year of income saved up. So if you've got 1 year of income and you put this in the Nasdaq 100, you put this a bit into Bitcoin, you also have a little bit of long-term government bonds and a little bit of gold, and maybe property, but you don't have to. If you simply just have those 4 asset classes and you are at least, say, 50% in the Nasdaq 100 plus Bitcoin, then you should make enough passive income from that portfolio to beat the devaluation of your labor if the portfolio has a size of roughly 1 year. So you're losing purchasing power on your income, you're winning purchasing power on your 1 year portfolio, then you're balanced out, then you're basically exactly at the middle point between the winners and the losers of the system. Of course, if you've got more than 1 year saved up, then you become a winner. So that, I believe, is level number 3, right? Level number 0 is you're struggling with the bills. Level number 2 is you don't struggle necessarily with being temporarily unemployed. Level number 3 is you become a winner of the system by having a diversified portfolio of highly returning assets. And that, again, is at roughly the 1 year mark. Now, how far do we have to go up in terms of income or in terms of expenses to be financially free in order to have enough income not to having to work anymore? Is it 3 years? Is it 4 years? Is it 5 years? Common wisdom is that we actually need 25 years of expenses in wealth. So you've got this 4% rule, right? The 4% rule is you can redeem up to 4% of your wealth every year in order to live from this and not lose any wealth. So once you've got 25 years saved up, you can redeem those 4%, not lose purchasing power, and live indefinitely without working anymore. Then you're not just a winner of the system, then you're not just getting squeezed, but then you're completely milking the system, right? Then you've beaten the system. Now think about how much 25 years actually is. 25 years of expenses. Let's say you've got a massive savings rate. Most people only save maybe 10% of their income, right? Maybe 20% of the income. Let's say you've got a massive savings rate and you save 50% of your income. Let's say you do this and you don't invest this actually in anything that beats monetary expansion. You invest it into something that just goes along with monetary expansion, say the S&P 500. Right? The S&P 500 grows by roughly the same rate as monetary expansion. So let's say you put all your money away in the S&P 500. You don't buy the crash, you don't buy the hype. You're simply just getting the average return. You keep your purchasing power and you save half of your income and the other half you spend. And you need 25 years. In order to be financially independent, in order to be financially free, you have to save up for 25 years. So they save 25 years of grueling work. You only spend half of your money. You still need 25 years until you reach financial independence. That's a very, very high bar to cross. It's very high and most people will not be able to achieve it in that common savings way. Most people that achieve these kinds of levels of wealth, they had several levers stacked on top of each other and they sold maybe a company, right? They figured out a business model that worked. Then they scaled this up maybe by hiring other people. Then they scaled this up even more by getting external capital, right? They're scaling with more capital. And then at some point, they might be selling all of their future cash flows from that business and get a huge rainfall. And that's then when they can retire, right? And this is the common way of becoming financially free in a somewhat reasonable time. Now, is there another way to achieve this without hitting the lottery or without building the next unicorn company? I believe there is. But again, it's not an easy path. Now, is there another way to achieve those 25 years of expenses without hitting the lottery or without building the next unicorn company? There probably is, but most people will not be able to achieve it. And that's totally fine, actually. You don't have to have that lofty goal of 25 years of expenses. Because here's the thing, most people that talk about this topic, they talk about expenses as a somewhat constant thing, right? Maybe they adjust with inflation, but as a somewhat constant thing. But if you're progressing in your career, right? If you earn more money, you probably also want to reward yourself somewhat, right? You don't want to necessarily live like the student anymore, right? You want to live in a house. You want to have a family. The family has demands as well, right? So over time, especially if you have 2-3 kids, your expenses will grow massively. So what tends to happen is that most people retire, most people feel financially comfortable to retire once the kids are out of the house and expenses drop easily by 50% because you need a smaller house, because you don't have to pay for the education, you don't have to pay for anything. So once those expenses drop, that's when people feel safe. And sometimes there's even a financial rainfall with an inheritance. So once you inherit and once you've got the kids out of the house, that's when most people retire. So the vast majority of people are not retiring early, say 20 years early, because they've been able to save that much.
Here are the videos that work on YouTube. XRP will be $12,000 guaranteed, or an AI explosion, top 3 cryptos to buy in November. A lot of pushing of greed, that's what gets the clicks. What doesn't get the click is a tutorial on how to make backtests, on how to build those sheets that in the end figure out what historically worked well in the past. The backtest that I often show here on this channel. I still very much enjoy producing this kind of content though. I also share these kinds of sheets, but I don't do it on YouTube. You also get direct access to me. Feel free to check it out. It's thebitcoinstrategy.com.
Now let's say you wanted to retire early. Let's say you really cannot find a job that you like to any degree. Right? You don't like working from home for a certain company. You don't like to work in the industry that you've learned. You don't like this whole concept whatsoever. You're willing to temporarily work a ton, but you don't want to work, say, in 5 years, right? You want to retire in 5 years. Is there a way that is relatively low risk to achieve this? I believe there is, but of course, nothing comes for free, right? It's still relatively high effort or relatively high inconvenience. One thing that definitely has to happen is income has to be super, super high. Now, how can we get the income high? We can get it high by being very skilled in something. And we can have it very high to sell that skill in a high income country. So you want to be in Switzerland or in Luxembourg or in Monaco or in Hong Kong or in New York. You want to have these very, very high income levels, but at the same time, you want to have very, very low expenses. So you want to be living in a low expense country and you want to have income in a high expense country. It's very hard to pull this off, but it's possible. There are companies in high expense countries like Switzerland, etc., that might hire you for Swiss income and still allow you to work remotely, not in the country. This is possible. It's very hard to pull off, but it's definitely easier to pull off than saving 25 years of income. So if you're skilled enough and if your skills are super rare, if you're a genius in AI programming, and there's a company that's well funded, that's got a lot of money, that can pay for your skill, and you've got as one of the negotiation points, not just a high salary, but also complete location independence, then you can pull this off. You probably also should optimize with taxes, right? So you want to potentially not bill them by a salaried employee, but you want to have a company and maybe issue invoices. But that's how you do this, right? If you want to have a savings rate of, say, 70 or 80%, You should get used to living in Thailand, or you should get used to living in the Philippines and work for a company that's maybe in Switzerland, or maybe in New York, or maybe in Hong Kong, or whatever it is, right? The difference in income between expensive countries and not expensive countries is multiple X's. And that's how we can achieve a very high savings rate. But that also means that once you stop working, you have to stay in those low expense countries, right? You need to feel comfortable living in the Philippines, for example. If you don't feel comfortable doing this, then of course it's way harder. On top of that, of course, investments should return more than monetary expansion. So you can't just afford to buy the S&P 500. You have to buy the Nasdaq 100 and you have to buy Bitcoin. You don't have to buy the next shitcoin. You have to be diversified. You have to buy various things, but you have to also have high risk, high return investments in your portfolio. And Bitcoin and the Nasdaq 100 are the most straightforward things. Having some long-term government bonds, having some gold in this makes a lot of sense as well, simply for the diversification effect, but the returns are generated by the riskier stuff. You have to do this again if you want to retire early. So let's say now, right, you use this geographic arbitrage massively and you actually save now 80%, let's say 80% of your income is saved, and the 20% that you do spend is still enough money that you feel very well retiring on this life standard, because again, you live in a cheap place. And so let's say you make $10,000 per month in a high income place, right? Hong Kong, Zurich, New York, whatever it is, that you negotiate maybe after a while that you work remotely. You get $10,000 per month, you get this into your company, and you also expense whatever you have to expense against this, right? When you buy a laptop, etc., this is a business expense. You don't just lose all your money from taxes and from mandatory retirement contributions and all of that. You don't do that. Instead, you simply just have this as invoices. You've got pretty much the 10K saved. Let's say you earn 11K and you pay 10% tax. You're left with 10K US dollars. And then you've got $2,000 per month in the Philippines, right? Let's say that $2,000 per month in the Philippines, or let's say even in Thailand, is a lot of money. In Thailand, you can easily live with that by yourself. If you've got a family, or if you're planning to have a family of several kids, then you have to go one level further down, and that would be the Philippines. But let's say $2,000 is enough to live in a developing country, and you want to live there, right? You kind of like the lifestyle, you like the warm weather, etc. You want to retire early, so probably you want to be close to a beach, right? So let's say that's your picture. You want to have the margaritas next to the beach for the rest of your life in the Philippines, in Thailand. You're okay with $2,000 per month. You want to have that as a passive income. You're currently making 10,000 US. So with 1 year of work, you're saving 4 years of expenses. Now do this for 5 years and you are already at the 20-year mark. Now combine this with somewhat more riskier investments and you achieve the 25 years. So after 5 years, you're done. You only need 5 years of that kind of setup that you can retire early. You never have to work a day in your life again. And you don't have to found this billion-dollar company that probably is not going to work out. You don't have to win the lottery. You just have to use geographic arbitrage. And doing that is much easier than saving 25 years, 50% of your paycheck way below your means, staying in this high-income country. You want to use that geographic arbitrage. It's not easy to pull off, but it's definitely possible if you are skilled enough. If you're just a generic web developer, it's not that easy to pull off. But if you've got something that most other candidates don't have, then companies are willing to bend over backwards, especially if you're not that expensive. And you can even go down a bit compared to other locals since you are living somewhere else, right? You can go down with your salary expectations. And that's the main thing companies actually look at. They don't really worry about where you work when most of the tech workforce is already working remotely anyway. There are remote first companies still. And so yeah, that's also one of the main reasons why I'm in Malaysia most of the time, right? I make my money with YouTube. I also have another tech job on the side that I spend all my money here in Malaysia. In Malaysia, the price level is much lower than in Hong Kong or in Germany, where I'm originally from. I'm using the geographic arbitrage. I'm getting my money from customers that are in high income countries, and I spend it in low income countries. And that elevates the overall living standard. It also makes it easier to retire early. But yeah, it's not as straightforward, right? You have to literally go around the globe in order to pull this off. The wealth level for financial independence is way, way higher. It's a very different beast comparing to just not having to worry about the wills or comparing to just winning from the system. Beating the system to a degree, to not having to work anymore, is on another level. It's achievable, but you have to, of course, give up some things, right? You have to potentially get a new social circle. If your social circle is not on board with that plan as well, you will have a very different lifestyle in a different country as well. But you're looking for a different lifestyle anyway, right? That's probably why you want to retire early. You don't want to keep your current lifestyle. And so having this drastic of a change is probably the right thing. If you've got Telegram, feel free to join us in Telegram. There's a link down below. Looking forward to chatting with you. If it's the first time here, feel free to subscribe. A like would be very much appreciated as well. It helps the channel grow. See you next time. Cheers.